Hey everybody! Welcome to another terrible podcast by comics. I am your host, Eerie Diamond. Hi! We have an amazing show today with one of my comedian friends and writers, Nina G. Say hi, Nina. we also have our other I'm so sorry, contestant. I just did my game show last night. I'm so sorry. My other guest, who is not on yet but will be on very soon, and is actually the co-writer of the book that Nina G is going to talk about today, which I'm very excited about. Nina, first of all, can you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Sure. I am a stand-up comic living in Oakland, originally from Alameda, which is right over there. And I play a lot of colleges, do a lot of disability awareness stuff because I am a person who stutters, and I also have dyslexia. So I bring that into my work when I do colleges, but it's mostly dick jokes when I do my nighttime gigs. So a lot of that. And my third book is coming out soon. And in my last book was the memoir, Stutter Interrupted, the comedian who almost didn't happen.
I did not know this was your third book. What was your first book?
The first book was with Mean Dave years ago, a children's book called Once Upon an Accommodation, where Dave illustrated it, and I wrote it. And there's also a workbook at the end to help kids who have a disability explain what they have and how to advocate, which is the goal of the book.
Oh, that is very cool. That is very cool. Oh wow, I didn't know, but I had no idea. I didn't even know that existed. That's very cool.
Yes.
Stutter Interrupted, I have read, which it's an awesome book. It's a great book too when you know you, because you really get to know a little bit more about you. I do have one question before we get into the new book. That's kind of about how did you get into comedy? I mean, I kind of know how you did from the book, but you want to I would love to hear a little bit about that, because normally people that have a speech thing aren't like, you know what I'd love to do is go on stage with a microphone and just talk to people and have to worry about this thing that's happening. So that's what I would love. Yeah. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, no, and I think speech thing is the best way to describe any kind of speech thing, because everyone always says a disorder, like I have a speech disorder, but really it's like other people who have a disordered way of interacting with me. That's my problem. So it's a speech thing I like more.
Okay, good. I'm glad, because
Yeah,
my whole point of it was like, let's say you pronounce a certain letter weird. That's a speech thing. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's just a speech thing. Like, it's not, whatever. But yeah, please. I'm glad you're okay with that.
I wish the field would also say that. Okay, so I lifelong comedy nerd, since I was like 4 years old, because when I was 4, that's when Steve Martin was really, really big. And that's when I kind of attached on to stand up. And then as I got a little bit older, my parents never put any restrictions on bedtime or on TV. And so I was watching Saturday Night Live. It's the reruns when they were on channel 44 at like 11 o'clock on weekdays. And so watched those. And that's when like I became a big fan of Gilda. Had a stuffed animal when I was 7. The that I named after her, and still liked all the other people on the show at that time too, and just started to get more and more into stand up as I got older. And when I was in high school, that's when, or more like middle school, I was like, okay, I think that I want to do stand up. I would try to write stuff and I would look up open mics. There was one time you had performed at Dorsey's before it closed, right?
No.
Oh,
No.
you did it. Oh,
I'm very new to stand. I'm like 6 years in. I'm not very.
okay, 6 years in. Okay.
Yeah.
So
And I grew up
Dorsey's,
here, so.
Dorsey's was a club that had an open mic night for like 20, 30 years. And it was on Thursdays. Linnell was the one who had hosted it way back. But before she hosted it, I called up when I was like 16 years old, and I was like, do you guys accept minors? Because I called up all these open mics to track if they accepted minors at their open mics. And the guy yelled out to the rest of the bar, this bitch wants to be Eddie Murphy. And I hung up scared because I really did want to be Eddie Murphy. That was what I wanted.
How old were you?
I was 15, 16 when that happened.
Wow.
Yeah. But then within a couple years, dream died because I was like, I've never seen anybody stutter who did stand up. And so I was like, yeah, it's not going to happen. Plus, I told my parents when I was like 16, I was like, I think I want to do stand up. And my mom said, unless you're hosting Saturday Night Live by the time you're 18, you're going to college. So that also, as nice and supportive as my parents were, they weren't on that. But I also didn't challenge it much. So, okay. So then cut 25 years.
By the way, not the worst advice. Not the worst.
Not the worst advice at all. No. And so 25 years after that, I was at a conference for people who stutter in 2009. I went there and kind of realized how much I was holding myself back. And there's a thing when you're a woman, you are socialized to make yourself small and not take up space. And when you're a woman who stutters, you especially don't take up space. And so when I came back from that conference, I was like, okay, I am, I need to extend myself more. And like, it's a book's called Stutter Interrupted because we're interrupted constantly in the world. But it was when I was interrupting myself in my own development that was the real issue. And so when I came back from that conference, changed a bunch of things in my life. But the main thing that I started to do within 6 months was to stand up. And so I started that in late February, early March.
Very cool. So how long have you been doing stand up then?
12 years in about a month.
Okay. Oh, I love that we all know exactly the month we fucking started stand up. It's the most ridiculous.
It was like late February or early March, so I'm not totally sure.
I can't even tell you when I started dating my husband, but I can tell you the month I started stand up. It doesn't make any sense at all. It really doesn't. It's a really weird thing. As far, may I ask you a little bit about your stuttering?
Yeah, totally, please.
So I'm sure, can you please tell the world, because just in case somebody watches this, what is the one thing you fucking hate about how other people, I want to say, interact with the stuttering? Can you please tell us, just the world or anybody who happens to watch this, like all 5 of us?
Yes. So I think the thing that I hate the most is when someone offers advice because the assumption is that I need to be fixed. And like, I can take you making fun of me, like, yeah, it's just gonna happen. But it's when, I get advice on stuff like there was this speakeasy, which was a thing that you put in your head, on your ears, and you would hear yourself talk. And when you hear yourself talk, that then you don't stutter as much at first, but then your brain gets accustomed, and then you do start to stutter again. But the thing costs like $5,000, but it was on Oprah. And so because it was on Oprah, everyone thought it was fucking gospel. So I would get all the time like, oh, there's this thing you put on your head and I saw it on Oprah and that's going to cure you. I'm good. Just fucking shut up. So
Also, why do you need to be cured now? I mean, you're pretty successful, so I don't really understand what the problem is.
Okay, so I gave a talk. Okay, come now. It's okay. Okay, so I did a talk on International Stuttering Awareness Day for a stuttering pride event, and I had to leave because I had some other gig, and so I talked, I left. Some guy follows me out, and he said, oh, I just wanted to talk with you. I work with people at UCSF, which is like, no, you don't work at the place. You're trying to act like you work with them. You don't, you know someone there.
Oh
and so he proceeded to tell me that I could cure my stuttering. And then what I always say is, well, if you cured me, I wouldn't have an act. So how's that going to help me? And I try to say it in a very cute way to like just get the fuck out. Because that as a woman, a lot of your interactions are, let me just say something charming and cute so I could get the fuck out. And so when I told him that, he kind of pressured a little bit more, and I was like, no, I'm good. And so like, you could, and that is the thing, is that there is this assumption that you should talk fluently all the time, as if all of you talk fluently all the time. So it's very weird.
Yeah, I feel like it's like this is what I like to hear when I talk to people. Wouldn't you like to be like that? And it's just like, who cares? Just, or people interrupting you. That's what I assume would be the most irritating fucking thing ever. To just have somebody like,
I'm Italian, so I'm used to it to a certain amount. Italians just do that. But it's like when I'm trying to get out the word, like I'll do, and people just start like yelling out like it's The Price is Right. So that's what's that? You I can't hear anything you said. Can anyone else? What'd you do, Eerie? Try it now. Hey, OJ. Eerie, ironically, is interviewing me about stuttering, and now she can't talk. Yeah, no, still. And
no.
Here we go.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay, I'm so sorry. I think something happened with my microphone real quick. Okay, we're good now. We're good. We're good now. You can hear me. Chronic, by the way. OJ.
Hi.
Thank you so much. I'm excited you're here. We were actually hadn't even really dove into the book yet. We were talking to Nina about her speech thing and like the irritating things that happen to her when she's out in the world and how annoying people are, and which is most of her act. So,
20, yeah.
OJ, hey, thank you so much for being on the show. Can you just tell us a little bit about yourself and introduce yourself a little bit?
Of course. I am a writer. I am a retired comedian. I get a pension of 2 drink tickets every 2 months. It's really nice.
That's the coolest thing I've ever heard.
I met Nina primarily through an open mic in Alameda at McGrath's Pub.
As
And
we do. Sorry.
yeah, of course. And all my favorite people I met at McGrath's Pub. And yeah, a lot of open mics, a lot of showcases, a lot of just traveling down to Dublin to support her and her. She really wanted to win some comedy competitions for some reason.
That's right. That's right. You were part of that. Yes.
So yeah, and then we rewrote this book together, and we're really proud of it.
Very cool. I do want to say really quick, this is a total side note and such a dumb story, but I want to tell it anyway, just for fun. Yay. I love when you wear the same coat to enough shows that I was actually at a show and I walk up to the bar, I pull out a drink ticket, I hand it to him, and he's like, "That's not our drink ticket." And I went, "Oh shit, hold on a second." I pull out like 5. I'm like, "Are any of these yours?" And he's like, "Oh, that one." I'm like, "All right, cool. Thank you." Like, that just tells you what an insane world this is. Like, we actually get paid in currency that we don't even use. Jackie, would you like to chime in on that? I assume, since you popped in. Comedy is fucking weird, dude. Okay, let's talk about the book. All right, let's talk a little bit about the book. What is the name of the book? What is the book about? OJ, do you want to start? Because we haven't heard enough from you yet.
Yeah, we wrote the book for History Press. It's called Bay Area Stand-Up Comedy, A Humorous History. We wrote it with the thought in mind that, there's no books for San Francisco comedy history nerds. There's a lot of history to cover. So let's just break it down by, decade, break it down by major achievements, break it down by major comedians, and tell the story of stand-up through the eyes of San Francisco, which we believe and can confirm through the book is kind of the epicenter of a lot of cultural movements.
Yes. So, I love that you said that, because I feel like everyone thinks of stand-up as being LA and New York. And if you guys know, you both know, a lot of times we have friends that are stand-up comedians, and it seems like there's this point where they're like, well, I reached my point now, I'm gonna now move to LA or New York. And you're just like, a lot of great people have come from here. And it just seems so silly to me that everyone's sort of we're sort of like some kind of like fresh, like sophomore year place for comedians,
Yeah.
Nina, can you tell me a little bit about what gave you the idea to even do this?
I was doing it was during the pandemic, and you find things to occupy yourself during the pandemic, which this is a result here. And figuring out ways to start to develop yourself in the way that you were, but instead of grinding it out, you find some alternatives. And so one of the things that I was really interested in at the time is, like, this is the first pandemic that everyone went through that is related. Like, stand-up comedy is fairly new. It's the first stand-up comic, happened in 1860. It's an American art form. And so during this Spanish flu times, stand-up wasn't really what it is now. But now stand-up is what it is. And so how we going to, how was humor going to be impacted? How was performance going to be impacted? And this, of course, this is the first pandemic that's impacted a larger group, whereas HIV/AIDS did impact stand up. And that's also where I started to ask and to investigate that. And so I was talking to Marga Gomez, who was sharing her own story about her experience in stand up and how
I
she
love
found
her.
it.
I love her. I just wanted to say I
She's
love
so
her.
great.
Yeah.
And she talked about the queer comedy scene and this place called the Valencia Rose, which is where queer comedy really had its roots. And Tom Amiano is considered the mother of queer comedy. And she came out of that place and then also cultivated her act at Josie's Juice Joint, which had opened after the Valencia Rose closed. So I was like, I don't know this, and I'm a really big comedy nerd. And then I called OJ and I was like, you know, there's this publisher that likes a lot of pictures in their book, and I think we could probably write a book. And then we did.
Okay. I'm sorry. Okay. I love that. And there's pictures, and let's do this thing. Like I would just that just sounds like the best.
It was like that, right, OJ?
Yeah. I mean, and so OJ, so you have you written a book with Nina before? Or no, you haven't done that. This is their first book you've written with her, obviously.
This is the first book, yeah.
Yeah, since this is her third book, and I already know about her other two. So what did you think about this? I mean, you were a former comic, a quitter, but not to be mean, not to be mean, but I have to tell you, when people tell me
smart is what he was.
people tell me what is the easiest thing about comedy, and I tell them quitting. And so I don't want you to feel bad about it, because anytime I've ever had even just an okay set, I want to quit the next day, but I don't. I don't.
Yeah.
It's like bad sex. You're like, I'm gonna have that good one again someday. You know what I mean? It's gonna like take me through. But so what did you think about that when she called you and asked you about that? Were you interested, or did you have to do a little research? Or
I am a big fan of Nina. I'm a big fan of her writing. I think she has a lot to say, and I really liked her book, Stutter Interrupted. And then up to a point, I think I had been writing the book on and off unofficially for about 10 years, because I wrote a blog called Courting Comedy, which is a San Francisco comedy blog. And from just the internet being around when I started the blog, just a lot of resources were showing up. A lot of people in the Bay Area who were comedians learned code and had their own websites. So there'd be entire archives of different articles that they had published about them that would connect me to another resource, a Facebook group full of like old Comedy Day photos. If you haven't heard of it, Comedy Day was, considered the Woodstock of stand-up comedy in San Francisco, where at the height was like 60,000 people in Golden Gate Park just to watch outdoor, voices in the air, cold as heck comedy.
yeah.
So just knowing about all these factors, and this is a privilege in the San Francisco Bay Area comedy to be like, oh, I am in the actual space that Phyllis Diller performed. Like I am in the Purple Onion, or whatever the Purple Onion has become.
Oh, the Purple Onion. Oh.
Yeah. So that's really cool. It's kind of unknown, unless you're a real big comedy fan, how much of a magnet for comedy San Francisco is. So I think I felt just like an obligation that in addition to all the work that I've done, some of these stories needed to be told, and some of these people who may have had like a hot show for 2 years really helped foster the tradition of stand-up comedy, and to connect someone who is considered like the godfather of political stand-up in Immort Saul with a comedian that we know very well and we beloved for the time he was doing it, named Jabari Davis, and the fact that bringers have been around since the dawn of stand-up as a major art form is dope. I get to do that. I get to bring that connection together for people in a book. That was, neat. That was reason enough to do it.
So all of that you just said, what you're saying is your head just went, sure. Is that what you're trying to say? Like it just was like, yeah, let's do this.
Well,
like, yeah.
I quit comedy or I retired from comedy to pursue other things and to take care of myself with my mental health and to really have some perspective about comedy. So it was always going to be fraught to do a book about stand-up, but I love Nina and I love the Bay Area and I love Bay Area comedy. So I felt like just push through and get it done.
Okay, but OJ, when I quit comedy, I'm gonna say I retired because that sounds way better. Thank you. Thank you.
Because it opens the door for you to come back. It's like Michael Jordan. Quit
That
basketball.
sounds way better because I will quit comedy at some point. As much as I love it. So take us through this book a little bit, Nina. A little bit about like what like just a little like take us kind of through it. Like where does it start? What points? Like give me a few points that you hit. Like kind of give us kind of an overview of what the book looks like.
Well, the very first stand-up comic performed in San Francisco, right outside of North Beach. So it was a place. It was a theater where it was torn down because Columbus Street had to come through. So it was there. And so he performed there, and I got this information from Rich Scheidner, who is a comic who performed lots of times on the Tonight Show, and now he does history of comedy too. And so he was a great help in this early time. So anyway, this guy, Artemis Ward, started there. The first place that Mark Twain ever did comedy was in San Francisco. Wow. And so, and they were friends, and Artemis was the one who had inspired Twain. So that's kind of how that went. So then cut to, and also San Francisco has been a great place to be weird. And I think
thank you.
Yeah. And that weirdness, I think, helps to facilitate comedy. So we will come back to that weirdness in just a sec. We have one chapter where we talk about Chaplin, because Chaplin filmed 5 films in Fremont, which is what's that place, Jason? Not Niles, and Niles is where they had a studio for silent films, and they have a museum there now. And that museum was a great help in getting information. I found out that Chaplin, like a lot of comics, first of all, he would go and pinch the butts of the women in the baseball stands. So early sexual harassment, not unlike some of the things now. And secondly,
no.
Oh no, is right. Yes. And secondly, he would walk around Niles in his character, because the Tramp was the first time that he performed character in that film, and that was filmed there. And so the people around there hated him because he was super cheap, and he would walk around and try to do his act on people at stores and stuff, which is totally what comics do now, which is they try to slide in like their next joke into a conversation.
Does that drive you fucking crazy? Like, that drives me crazy when you're talking to somebody and they're like, yeah, and you know what I did on my vacation, and then 5 minutes later they go on stage and they do everything you just, that drives me insane. I'm like, I thought we were having a normal conversation, bitches. What are you doing right now? What is happening? Like, I'm sorry.
Yes.
I will say the Charlie Chaplin thing, it sounds like he was doing kind of an Andy Kaufman thing where he was just like, you know what I mean? Like, I'm just gonna like meld it into what's going on and see what happens. And I love that.
Yeah, I mean, I think it was more practice than anything else. Like, I think it was just him kind of like trying it all out. So anyway, the silent film era ended, and because Niles was on the train tracks, they had to move studios because it's really hard to do a talkie when there's a train coming through. So that ended that. And then we cut to the 1950s, and Phyllis Diller, who lived in Alameda at the time, and like I had always heard stories about her growing up in Alameda, that she would do her laundry and she would make people laugh there, and just like little things here and there. So she started at the Purple Onion, and around the same time ish, Mort Saul started, and he is from Canada, then LA, and then up here, but he moved to Berkeley because he liked this girl, and he tried theater, didn't really like it, and then he did a show at the Hungry Eye, kind of trying out, and he brought all of his intellectual friends from Berkeley. He killed and signed a contract. Didn't do so well for the time being, but back then they developed people, like they believed in them, developed them, and so he had a home there, and that's also where he changed modern comedy. So he was very important. Lenny Bruce, the first place that he headlined was in San Francisco. Or some people kind of argue that, but I say I think it's true. And the first place that he was arrested for obscenities was in San Francisco. Yay! And they said that, but the thing is, they said that he was innocent because in North Beach at the time, they had The Howl that had been published, and they had to go through a court case there, and that was found to not be obscene. And then they had like topless dancers around, and so like the community standard of talking about cum and saying cocksucker, like that was the norm in that area. And the San Francisco cop had to testify that Lenny Bruce's act did not cause him to be aroused.
Oh my God. Please tell me that in the index, you can look up cum and cocksucker and it will flip back.
OJ was on the Zoom with me where I said, we have to print the word cocksucker in this book. Are you okay with that?
It's very important.
Just a word, guys. It's just a word. If it offends you, you're probably a cocksucker. So.
But many of us are anyway, Eerie. And that was his point.
And there's nothing wrong with that, by the way. There's nothing wrong with that. A lot of people are happy about that.
It's probably a good thing.
It's a good thing. It's a good thing. I will say, I when I worked in retail, I had some, I'm sorry, I just have to tell my stories. There was a one of my retail friends, she was on the phone, and the person on the phone was mad at her because for some reason, and she goes, "Oh yeah, cocksucker," and she hung up the phone and she started laughing. And I said, "What are you laughing about?" And she said, "How does she know?" And I thought that was amazing because, right? Like, let's just be happy about it. Like, anyways,
Yeah,
so
and so I just want to say a few more things before OJ comes in, because he
okay,
needs to talk about his overview too. So
okay,
I go into the Holy City Zoo and that whole thing, and Cobb's. Cobb's was started by women. Femme props started Cobb's. You wouldn't know it now, but femme props started Cobb's. Um, and then the boom ended in 1993 when the Holy City Zoo closed. And OJ, pick it up from there.
so wait. Can I just say before you pick it up, what year are we in? What year are we in now? Do you do it chronologically? I'm assuming.
Yes, yes.
What year are we in, OJ? What year are we in? 1993?
1993 is
Okay.
where we pick up. I think we need to backtrack a little bit in terms of the chronology, because the 80s it's un it's unbelievable how hot San Francisco comedy was in the 80s, in as much as they had 2 or 3 print publications and year reviews in the Chronicle. Like, this was a
Wow.
happening that couldn't be fathomable at your local open mic these days, that people were packing out, uh, 8 different clubs across the city at one time.
Wow.
But there were still problems with diversity that still plagues comedy to this day, because as your A. Whitney Browns and your Will Durst were killing it in San Francisco, you had a nascent but very powerful and potent urban comedy scene that was very hip hop, that was very, they like, interviews would indicate that stand-up comedy wasn't so much like, it wasn't the theater crowd. They weren't precious with it. They wanted to laugh. They wanted to get, going to the Marriott in Oakland to see a comedy show by super agent Marcus King was, it was a party. You're there to have fun.
Mhm.
So you had you had Mark Curry, you had Linnell, you had a great help to the book, Donald Lacey and Warren Thomas, and you had all these great Black comedians. And lo and behold, when I was checking the archives of the Chronicle, there was discussions for a lawsuit with another comedian named Ray Booker about, why am I not getting booked at the Punchline? Why am I not getting booked at Cobb's? I know all those people. Why is it so hard to break in there? So you have this entire like Def Jam, these household names being made almost seemingly out of thin air, but there's no equity, there's no inclusion, and that's a huge blight on comedy to the day, where there's a lot of segregation, especially between quote Main Street comedy and urban comedy. But it really picks up for San Francisco comedy as a whole when Cobb's burns down, or at least nearby things to Cobb's burns down. It had moved from Cobb's Pub in the Marina District to the Fisherman Wharf District of San Francisco, and it was doing pretty well. It was considered like a date night comedy club. And then, a fire breaks down, and there's a bunch of lawsuits, and things get flooded, and it just becomes this unsavory thing. So at the last of its, Cobb's at that point was one of the last 2 comedy clubs in San Francisco. And when it burned down, it was the last independent one. And so with the help of some anonymous benefactors and, comedians breathing in drywall and moving chairs. They were able to open up the location that it's currently at on Columbus. And that ironically used to be a club called, it was
Boarding house.
The boarding house. Yeah. So the actual block.
Terrible name.
Yeah. The actual block that Cobb's is on is like, it's ground zero for, a lot of stand up that you wouldn't know was there because there's no plaque or anything like that. But unfortunately, that also was bought by Live Nation, as the Punchline was a few years before that. So you have this push and pull in the early 2000s of comedy where you have, advancements like YouTube and MySpace extrapolating how much comedy can be produced and consumed by, a very, very knowledgeable, very smart, very active audience. And that would lead to a lot of, new superstars, I would call them, after the kind of arena rock comedy phase. But you also have all these corporate factors that kind of really influence where comedy is going for the next 20 years.
Yeah. Oh, wow.
And,
that was like,
just one more thing.
That was a lot. Go ahead, Nina.
Sorry. It's a lot. And that thing that OJ said about the plaque, I've never seen, like, we have such a rich history in the Bay Area that no one respects. There's not a mural, there's not a plaque. You go into City Lights, they don't even have a humor section, and less than a block away, stand-up comedy was changed forever. And so I really challenge San Francisco to fix that.
Yes. I do want to ask you guys, we're gonna run low on time, but I really want to ask you guys a few questions. First of all, to address what you just said, OJ, I still see that today, that there's not, the diversity is not there. It's not only minorities, but it's women in general. And I hear you. And I'm glad that you dedicated some time in your book to that. As a comedian, and Nina knows this as well, there's this whole, like, it doesn't matter. Anyway, I'm not going to get into that. I'm sorry. My head started to explode, but I'm not going to do that because I want to stick to the book. Tell me, I want to know, and I'll ask you, Nina, first, your favorite interview that you did for this book, because I know you guys did actual interviews with people, and and that's my favorite thing in the world, is to do I've done documentaries. It's the best thing in the world. Tell me what your favorite interview you did was.
Okay, so there's so many, because I mean, like, Larry Bubbles Brown was pivotal in this book, because he gave me a lot of, like, the core things. Like, he talked about when he was first on Letterman, that he got on the plane, flew back to San Francisco, landed, got in the car, drove right to the zoo, and watched himself. Just as he walked in the door, Dave was just introducing him, and he got to watch his appearance on Letterman at the same club that he started at. And, like, that just makes my heart flutter with love. But so he has just been really great. But I got to interview Don Novello, who is Father Guido Sarducci.
Oh,
and
wow.
And I'm Italian American. I'm Catholic. I thought he was a real priest till I was like 10. Like, I didn't know that.
My God, I love him so much. I love him so much. Okay, I'm sorry. I just had to say that. Go ahead. Sorry.
Yes, no.
Myself.
And I talked to him for like an hour, because the first place that he ever did his character was at the intersection, which was in North Beach. And then I learned stuff like the first time that he ever appeared was on a show on Channel 20 that was on at like this weird time. It was this weird show. And he appeared as a character. Then he started to perform as that character. But I love stuff like he bought the cape. It's a women's opera cape, and he bought it for $7.50 at the St. Vincent de Paul in San Rafael. Like I fucking love that kind of information. And so like a Saint store is where he bought it, and then he developed it at a church. And then he got arrested at the Vatican for imitating a priest. And they took the cloak, but he got it back, and he still has it. And so just talking to him about that kind of stuff, I was just like, I like hung up and I cried. So that was mine.
Oh my God. Grimes was Father Guido Sarducci for Halloween one year. And I wrote him like 3 jokes so he could tell him every time that somebody said, wait, are you Father Guido Sarducci? And he's like, yes, I know. Like, yeah, so it was we had the glasses and everything. It was amazing. OJ, your favorite interview for this book?
Well, I have to say, just for the whole process, if you ever have a chance to do a book like this, or you're interested in doing a book like this, you really get a sense of why it's a privilege to be a comedian or be around comedy, is because everyone that we talk to are just fun and funny. Like, even if you don't feel like you got like enough for the book, maybe that fact leads to another fact. It's just like, I got to spend like an hour with someone who I respect and I admire their comedy, but also they get timing, they get jokes, they get humor, they got a verve. You can make them laugh, you feel good. So I think that can be said for everybody that we interviewed. I would say the 2 patron saints of San Francisco comedy for me, especially writing this book, is Jane Dornacker and Warren Thomas. These are 2 comedians who, passed before they were due, but if you look back on their appearances on Comedy Tonight, or if you hear them on Alex Bennett Show, or wherever you could see them, they presaged a lot of where comedy is. Jane Dornacker was an Amazon. She was badass. She was in bands. She was, crossing between mainstream clubs and the Valencia Rose. Just this very tall, very boisterous, but very weird. She had a very like Maria Bamford-esque appreciation for kind of free thinking, free movement, free, like she's expressing something that doesn't feel it's entirely tied to her gender, but it's like an inversion and an abstract expression of that. And getting to talk to Tom Amiano, who knew her personally, was like really, because you can read as many like Wikipedia articles or Chronicle articles as you want about these people, but like they were known, they were loved, and to speak to people who love to talk about them and love to remember them was impactful, especially for me as a Black comedian. Warren Thomas was, he was a comedian's comic. He expressed a lot of the things that we think that like is really fostered in San Francisco. He spoke really fast. He had really funny, really like intellectual references, but he was also very, he's very raw. He's very blue. And that combination would lead to these incredible riffs that you couldn't, most of San Francisco comedy, we tried as much as we could to push it into a book, but it's freedom. It's you're away from all the cameras and all the lights and all the meetings and all the agents. Like, you come to San Francisco to do comedy, and Warren Thomas whether he knows it or not, or knew it or not, or is expressed or not, I believe he fostered the idea of like the super hyper focused Black intellectual comedian of the 90s who was both, could do both rooms, who could be, he could be everything. And, he was tragically passed away before he reached, the level of prominence I think he could have in later years.
Mhm.
And to talk to Donald Lacey about him and just like really characterize him, like he just, to know that not only did he seem cool, he was cool. He was like, there's something about the best comics where you want to be them, or you want to, take from them, but you can't because they're so universally themselves. And to have that perspective on someone that I really care about and really look up to was a huge part of doing the book.
Wow, that's really cool. I'm very excited that the book is going to introduce people to comics and influences that maybe people didn't know about, and I think that's a really big deal. Uh, this is a weird thing to go into, but Nina, what do you think? Like when you look, you now you've reflected on, I don't even know how many years of comedy in the Bay Area. What do you, where do you feel like, what do you feel like the scene is now? I mean, you're in it, you're soaking in it. Like, what do you feel like it, like, where do you think it is? Like, what?
I mean, I think that's a good question. I think post-pandemic or in pandemic, wherever the fuck we are in the pandemic, like it's everything is just kind of tossed in the air. And I mean, it, and also the economics of the computer stuff of like Silicon Valley, to me that's kind of fucked up comedy, because it's harder for an artist to live and to work and to just be here. And so it's like just Stephen Pearl, we had interviewed him, and like so we have some great one lines just from him because he's a one line comic, and he talked about how it was just easy to live and then easy to work, and I think that has disrupted things. And also I don't think San Francisco audiences are what they once were. I think when you go to Comedy Day, there's still that flavor, because San Francisco audiences, not East Bay audiences, but San Francisco audiences, were very patient with where the comic went, because they were there. It was like experimental theater. And there's a story from Milt Abel, who said that he was in that he heard about a comic who was a middle act who was at a East Bay club, and the headliner was on stage, and the owner of the club pointed to the stage and told the middle act, "Do you hear that? Hear it?" And the middle act was like, "Yeah, I don't hear anything." And the club owner said, "That's art," meaning that the San Francisco comics could do art and not have to make people laugh, but the East Bay comics had to make them laugh. And so that being a difference there from the past. Now, I wish San Francisco was a better audience. I think now there's the snapping. Like, I agree with you. I agree. You don't have to agree with me. Laugh or don't laugh. And so there's those kinds of things that I like. I want the past to come back, but of course it's not. We change and we move on. And so I just wish people were more, it was a symbiosis thing that I don't think it is anymore, if that makes sense.
No, that makes sense. That totally makes sense. Especially when you're reflecting like that. you know, on what the audiences were like. OJ, I know you're not doing comedy anymore. I'm sure you're still a fan of comedy, obviously. Um, you know, I want to ask you where you think it is, but you're not really in it anymore. What do you think of?
But he knows. He knows.
But, okay, so what? I mean, what do you? How do you like? Have you checked out shows? How do you feel about? I realize the pandemic has kind of thrown a wrench into it, but you've seen the evolution. I mean, where do you think we're at? Like, what are your thoughts? You know?
I definitely make a point, or at least made a point when before the pandemic, to go to as many live shows in LA as possible. I live down here, but not for entertainment, so don't be mad at me. That's another
So mad at
fun
you.
aspect of San Francisco comedy. This weird little kid syndrome to the bigger comedy towns. But from what I could tell, and things that I saw as I was on my way out, was things will always be extremely difficult for, you know, people of color, people of different gender identities, people of different sexual orientations. But the cool thing about San Francisco comedy is, without much prompting, you encounter so many different walks of life. You know, I got I got hip to a lot of kind of feminist theory and gender politics. Like, not every comedian will, but as comedy becomes more available, just knowing that, oh, all I need to start a scene in my own hometown is a mic and a night and and a list and a bar that doesn't mind kind of losing on some money. I could do comedy. As that keeps perpetuating, you know, especially with Zoom shows, especially with, you know, platforms like YouTube and Twitch, you're gonna have generations and generations of people really melding with not just themselves and kind of like pushing themselves out as like these comedy entities, so to speak, but you're gonna have a lot of like just strange connections. Like, in a lot of ways, I think our book is really celebrating that, you know, Nina knew about comedy since she was a baby, you know, like she was very engaged with comedy as like as a young adult. She went to, you know, go to the comedy clubs, go listen to comedy radio and all that. And I had a similar situation where I love like Comedy Central, but I didn't know anything about Alex Bennett's show. I didn't know anything about all these like institutions in San Francisco Comedy Day. It would have been great to know about that as a teenager. So as more information comes in, it's not going to be like a solve for, you know, uh, bookers who only favor their friends, or, you know, people who think that they're too big to talk to you, and it's just like, dog, we're at the same open mic, why are you big timing me? I'm just trying to be your friend. Or, you know, difference of opinions about how comedy should be between the audiences and the bookers and the comedians themselves, or harassment, like every ill that has factored into stand up since the beginning of time will be there, but it will change the context, because so many people are empowered to do their own thing, be themselves, and find a community of people who may not be exactly like them, but are like-minded enough to do some cool stuff.
Oh, that's actually, I can't really add on that. That is beautiful. And I will say the one thing I love about doing comedy is that I do, it's you know, being on stage is amazing. Having a great set and feeling that love from the audience is just, oh, you know, it's drugs. And it really is, it's drugs. And because you're making somebody laugh, and it's involuntary. They cannot, it's the fact that you can do that means you touch them in some way that they actually involuntarily laughed. And it's a magic power that you think you're a fucking witch, you know what I mean? And it's amazing. And the second best thing about comedy is being there, and you are absolutely right, and hanging out with other comedy people, and having those connections, and they're all fun and interesting and different and diverse, and I love that. That's my second favorite thing about doing comedy, is getting to meet this huge group of people that are so, I would never know any of them if it wasn't for all of us being on the same show. And I fucking love that. Any of I'm sorry, I just went on like a tangent, but Nina, we're wrapping it up. Can you tell us when it's coming out, how we can get the book, it just, you know, how much it is? No, I'm just kidding. Just tell us like the good stuff about it.
Well, it's $21 and it's
Oh yeah, oh yeah.
It's totally fine to say the price. And it's pretty much going to be sold everywhere. I mean, CVS carries these books. You may see us at the checkout. I think when they open it up and see Lenny Bruce talking about cum, they may not sell it. And when that happens, we're going to exploit the hell out of it. But it can be, you know, Amazon, your independent bookstore, whatever. And then OJ and I will be doing some talks. We don't know what that'll look like because of COVID, but you will see us more. And
it comes out on Valentine's Day.
Valentine's Day, yes.
Very nice.
Which is perfect because.
Perfect.
Yeah.
I love you. Here's some comedy. I love it. One more thing, before OJ, before you say your last words, that sounds terrible. I'm sorry. Before you say your last thing, anybody have any questions? We have some comedians. Deneen, yes.
And do real fast. I'm actually a big East Bay Area comedy. That's where I cut my teeth as a fan. And, you know, you were saying Ray Booker and Warren Thomas. I actually went to Monroe High School, and this was way after I left, but Brian Copeland went to Monroe High School. But so are you touching on some of that? Because that was really my scene. And then I would go to the South Bay, like Fubar's, Martinez. But I just love the names because they all played the Bay Area. I mean, same thing, family. We love comedy growing up, you know. Of course, Bill Cosby, and I know OJ, like Nipsey Russell, you know, Geraldine, some of that, but I guess we're lucky in the Bay Area because I just loved and to this day, I wish there was more diversity because I call it flavor and I get really bored with kind of the same old. So big Zoom, they know I met them all through Zoom. You know, as a comedy fan, I've just met so many different diverse people. And as a fan, it's just only enriched my life and my enjoyment of it. But do you touch on the other side of the bridge comedy scene as well?
Oh, definitely. We give major love and shout outs to Kimball's East and the Englander, Dorsey's Locker, and the Bay Area Back.
Tommy T's Westwana. That's where I cut my teeth as the first comedy club.
Yeah.
Going. $6 to get in and a 2-drink minimum.
Yeah, we definitely give love to Tommy T's as well. It's a lot of those rooms were they had a lore if you were, you know, kind of newer or predominantly in San Francisco. But I say it in the book that in those rooms, comedy is a utility. It's not for you to flex how smart you are. It's about making sure that, like, if there's a heckler, putting them down. If there's if something wild is happening, you know, make sure you have a riff prepared. And we definitely give a lot of credit to, you know, there's a reason why the other cafe opened up a branch in Emeryville. You know, there was an entire, there's San Francisco Bay Area has so many like pockets of diversity where it's just like, I couldn't even fathom living anywhere else. You know, I'm from Pittsburgh, Bay Point. And
Oh, yeah. I used to
yeah.
work at Chevron over there at the refinery.
Oh yeah. So like all the, you know, levels of immigration and all the levels of people who have lived there for years, there's just like, yeah, most of my cultural touchstones wouldn't be the same if I didn't live in the Bay, and you can see that in the comedy as well.
Yeah. I mean, I live in San Luis Obispo now, which is actually, it was easier to start seeing comedy come back again for me, because I kind of lost touch in the mid-90s. So, you know, it was great. And I've met, you know, actually made a lot of them as friends now that I'm a little older and more mature and not afraid to go talk to them. But, you know, I'm sure I was going to say, Rooster Two Feathers is still there. And my story, they said like, remember Sinbad won the Gong Show or something, and he was going to play there. So my mom and I went, but he got a contract in LA. So this Ellen DeGeneres chick was there, and you know, Dana Carvey, you know, but thank you for remembering the names, because it's been so long for me that, you know. And actually when I was in high school in 1975, I saw, Carl Witzik, the 7 words guy. See, I'm already forgetting.
Carlin
Carlin at the Berkeley Rap.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
That's my favorite bit ever, by the way. Jackie, did you have any question you wanted to ask or anything, or are you good?
OJ and Nina, I enjoyed this so much. It was like getting a master class in an hour in comedy history, and I loved it. OJ, I don't think I know you, but I love Nina. How do I get an advance copy of the book? Because I'm very impatient and I don't want to wait.
Oh, wow. Yeah. She wants some, like, you know, backstage VIP shit.
No, I'll pay for it. I'll buy it. I just want to know.
I don't know. Nina, you wanna sell your copy or something? I don't know.
Okay, so we get advance copies. You may get advance copies. We don't like. I don't know when we'll get ours. And oh yeah, OJ, I had ordered 250 copies, and we can figure out what we're gonna do with them.
Okay.
I don't know when they're gonna come. So
okay, when and where are your book signings and your,
well,
you know, when
you don't
when
have time
is the
for
very
that.
first time it's going to roll out and I can
Tell
show
us
up
where
and-
we can see that, because we don't have time for you to mention everything, but where can she see that? Are you going to post that
well, we're
somewhere?
gonna have a big party, God willing, at the Alameda Comedy Club on, is it the 19th, OJ?
Yes, or the
Okay.
January? Oh, February, I'm assuming.
yes,
February,
February.
Perfect. There you go.
February 19th.
There you go, Jackie. There you go.
All right, I'm writing this down right now.
With your mask on. Thank you guys so much for being on the show. OJ, did you have any, I know I don't want to say last words. It just sounds like you're gonna die after this, but did you have any last comments? That sounds better.
Yeah, if you can, if you want, and if you need, for more information about the book, go to bayareastandupcomedy.com. That's where you can find the pre-order link, and we'll post our events, and hopefully we'll see you there.
Yay. All right. Well, I'm expecting my copies soon. I want to just say thank you guys so much for being on the show. We really appreciate it. We being me and actually just me. Thank you. Excuse. I'm Eerie Diamond. Thank you so much, Nina G. Appreciate you. And OJ, thank you so much for being on the show, OJ Patterson. And we are so excited about the book. Jason, my dad, Deneen, Jackie, Ellie, thank you guys so much for being on for joining in. I was gonna do this, but you know, I wanted to, we already got some tips because Jason and Deneen already know our Venmo. So thank you guys so much for tipping us, and we really appreciate you. Very excited about the book, guys.
Great show.
I can't think of a better Valentine's Day gift for your loved ones. What's the name of the book one more time, Nina?
Bay Area stand-up comedy, A Humorous History.
Thank you so much. Bye, guys.